I now recognize Representative Brian Mast of Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for your answers and your testimony. And I want to go to the testimony, for each of you, which I read, but where I saw something missing, and that's where I want to get to it. We heard a lot of things listed numerous times. Specify the enemy. It's been one of the biggest points of this entire debate that we've been having today. Is specify the enemy. We talked about mechanisms to decide when a conflict is going to be over, or how to add associated groups, or whether we can detain enemies, or in what way, or how we keep Congress informed. There's something that I heard very little conversation of from our witnesses, and I'd like to have you all elaborate on it in whatever order you feel like piping up and speaking. I heard no emphasis on articulating the end state. What is the political objective to be achieved through that use of force? Whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Bosnia, Somalia, Kosovo, Panama, Grenada, Vietnam, Europe, you name it. What is that end state? And I was curious from you all why I hear very little on end state.
I'll say a brief word about that. So I mentioned very briefly in my testimony and in my written testimony that one of the key elements of defining the enemy is also defining what your strategic objective is. And I think this is such an important point that you raise, because when you're fighting a non-state actor group, they're not going to sign a treaty with you to bring an end to the conflict. That is not going to be the end point of the war, as traditionally was the case when we were engaged in wars with states. And the end result of the war can't be that we've killed everybody on the other side. That's A, not realistic, and B, probably not an appropriate aim either. So I do think this is exactly the kind of conversation that we ought to be having, is what is the end of these military operations? And that part of what Congress can do is be engaged. Part of the reason for this reauthorization requirement is that keeps Congress engaged in that conversation, having regular reporting back to Congress as well as to what has been the progress and to what end. That's exactly the question to be asking. And so I think you're completely right to raise that concern. And I think we haven't had enough of that conversation in the last 20 years.
Mr. Goldsmith, if you want to add anything?
I'll just say briefly, I agree with Professor Hathaway. This is one of the most important issues that Congress needs to weigh in on. Presidents are risk averse. Congress is risk averse. President Obama and DoD General Counsel Jay Johnson actually outlined a vision in general terms of what the end of the war looked like, which may be one that Congress should look at. It's basically a state where, as Professor Hathaway says, you haven't killed in every threat. You haven't eliminated every threat. It's a dangerous world. You can't do that. The question is whether you have diminished the threat such that you can disengage from what has been endless war, while not also at the same time not allowing the threat to reappear. That is the challenge. And frankly, that's been the big challenge for 20 years after 9/11. And frankly, I don't know of a whole lot of people who have a great answer to that question. So,
Mr. Goldsmith, let's have a little conversation here. You said something important. I don't want to cut you off. You said that the threat won't reappear, and that seems to be is going to reach that is there, and we should be concerned about that. No doubt, it has to be taken into the calculation, but it's one of those difficult things to ever reach, given the creativity of people. Right? I'm sure we could all have that debate. I'd take the last minute. Did somebody have something they wanted to offer here? I heard somebody.
No.
Maybe not. All right. So I'd take this last 40 seconds and I'd give it to any of my colleagues if they wanted to venture out there and say that this is what they believe the end state for Afghanistan should be.
Mr. Mast, I'll say it's something that Congress needs to discuss, and that's what this is about, so that we are engaged and not just leaving it to the executive branch. So it's something that has to be a conversation so that we're involved in it. The beginning, the middle, and the end. Congress should be, worked in there. So I don't know if there's a specific definition that
I'll reclaim, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I totally agree with what you're saying. Just wanted to close on it. Just wanted to hear if any of my colleagues had a speculation on what that end state should be. Look forward to talking to you about it, Mr. Chairman. Take care.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back.